The word of the Lord.
Your servant is listening. Speak your words of wisdom, for the words you speak are everlasting life.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through that town. Now, a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was, but he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. When they all saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning. Wow, did you all get an extra night's sleep last night? You know, I invariably, we're all so stupid, because in the sense that we know that we have an extra hour of sleep, so what do? We stay up an extra hour, isn't it? Shame on you. Anyway, we all do it, and it's funny how, and then we get up and say, "Did you enjoy that extra hour of sleep?" Okay. I want to mention something about the first reading before I begin. The first reading is from the Book of Wisdom, and today we celebrate the beginning of National Vocation Awareness Week, and that the first book from Wisdom really speaks of some really strong emphasis of when we recognize God's blessings, when we recognize how He touches our lives, we are not demanded, but we are drawn to serve the Lord. And it speaks of vocations in many ways, not just priestly vocations or religious vocations, but all of our vocations to respond to the needs of the Lord. And so it's a very beautiful piece, and it goes right along with the understanding of the scripture, the rest of the scriptures as well. But it just points out, it sort of glows in my mind, the idea of vocations and to really call to ourselves, if we truly recognize, our younger people, if we truly recognize and see God's blessings in our lives, well, maybe we are called to respond, to give of our lives, to show our, recognize that maybe this is a vocation that we are being called to. Because when we recognize the gift of God, where else do we go? And that's so very important for us. I want to mention to you about this gospel reading. I came across this funny joke. It says this couple and their small little boy went out to dinner, and the boy found a little nice silvery dime, and he picked it up and, oh wow, and of course, as some kids do, he put it in his mouth. And they're sitting down there at a table, and all of a sudden the kid starts choking on the dime. And the mother stands, oh, help us. And this gentleman comes over, and he picks up the kid and gives him the Heimlich and pats on his back, and the kid goes, the dime shoots out of his mouth. And the woman looks to him, and she says, oh, are you a doctor or an emergency person? He says, no, I work for the IRS. I just love this joke because it makes us think, because for the past two Sundays we've heard about tax collectors, if you noticed. One of them that comes up before I'm not like this tax collector the Pharisees looking at. So the tax collectors in Jesus' time were looked upon with great disdain, as they sometimes are today. Okay? But the fact is that they were even worse in those days, because they were collecting taxes not just for the government, they were taking taxes for the Romans, who weren't of the government, but were invaders. And they were looked upon with such disdain, such hatred. And to tell you the truth, they made lots of money. So we hear about good old Lazarus. He was the one who just has a great deal. He's the head. What did he say? He's the head tax collector, and it's so important for us to recognize that he's the head tax collector, and it says specifically that he was a wealthy man. Now, when you hear this term "wealthy person," in Greek, when it's the translation in Greek and Jewish understanding, a wealthy person there were things that were placed upon it. Either you were born into wealth, and that wealth was a part of your nature, or you were a wealthy person because of greed, and you took from other people. And if you were a tax collector, that easily shoved over to that side. And the idea, of course, when the tax collector is that, when he took the tax, he not only took the tax for the Romans, but he took a little bit for himself to pay for his needs. And the Romans didn't care anything about how much you took, as long as they got what they wanted. So some of those tax collectors were really lining their coffers. That's very much. And so when we hear that this tax collector is very wealthy, he's the head tax collector, and he's in Jericho. Now I want to place this into perspective, because this is Jesus walking through Jericho. Have you ever been to Israel? Jericho sits, there's the mountain where Jerusalem is on. Jericho sits in the valley right before you go up to Jerusalem. You go up this unbelievable incline up to Jerusalem. And it's the city of Jericho. It's the famous city, where the walls come tumbling down and everything else. But it is that city that is right before you enter into Jerusalem. And we all know Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem for his death. He's there to show the world that he's going to die for us. And he's walking through it. He's been known for, his years of preaching and everything else, and healing and touching people. He's known, and so he's bringing this great crowd of people with him, because they are thinking he's going to Jerusalem to get us out of the Romans' hands. A lot of them think it that way. And so they're looking at him like, this guy's great, this guy's better than sliced bread or whatever. And so as they're walking here, the crowds are amazing. And of course, the tax collector. One of the scholars, they were gave a little, was reading one of their homilies on this, and he was trying to put this into perspective for us. And he gave the example of, let's say if the Pope went to Washington, and he went to Washington, and as he's walking, has his parade through Washington, he mentions that maybe some of the people in our political stature, and he uses a vice president. Of course, it was several years ago, so it was a different vice president. So I'm using this same example. Let's say the Holy Father is going through visiting the United States, has a parade through Washington, and Donald Trump couldn't make it on time. So he wants to get there, or maybe not Donald Trump, the Clintons, Joe Biden, take your pick. I'm not trying to be political. You take your pick. They get the ones that are wealthy, not looked upon very happily, and there are people who have disdain about them. You take your pick. I know there are many more. They're politicians. But the fact is that they can just imagine they didn't get there in time or whatever, they can't see, and so they climb up one of the cherry trees in Washington. Can you imagine the news and the response people would be looking at? Isn't that the president, or isn't that the former president, or is it the vice president? It would be unbelievable. This is the example that Jesus is that we're hearing about here. This man is of great power, of great wealth, and he's up in a tree watching Jesus. And the message is that he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He's gone to such great extent because this Jesus means something to him. And it changes his life. It means just so much something to him that he goes to make a fool out of himself. And he's up in the tree, and then all of a sudden Jesus, come on down. I'm gonna stay at your house today. I'm going to eat with you. I'm going to dine with you. Just imagine what the news service would be today. He'd be all over all of the, including Fox. He'd be all over everybody's news, saying, "Look what happened today." And the message is that, of course, this Jesus comes for those of us who are sinners. Do we have any sinners here? Do we have any sinners here? Do we have any sinners? I'm not seeing all the hands raised up because you don't want to be like that Pharisee last Sunday, Oh, I'm so good, not like the rest of these sinners, okay? The message that he is giving us is that he comes for us. He comes to make certain that, and when we realize what he does for us, when we realize when we are touched by him, that changes us. And what's the case? No, he turns around and he says, when he's sitting down to dinner with Jesus, he says, if I've ever cheated anybody, I'm not going to pay what the law tells me, 20-fold. I'm going to pay 400-fold. I will repay back tremendously. His heart is changed. His heart is changed because he has been touched by Christ. That is a call for all of us. It's a call for us. And then he says, I give half of my belongings, everything I have, I give back to the poor. I will give to the needy, the hungry, to make certain that I don't put myself in a situation where I'm looked at as a crook or a thief, or I want to give honor to my brothers and sisters. That's what Christ does for us, to us, makes us aware. And it's a response of what our faith is. This is